agree. No one's impugning your integrity.
No, I know you're not.
And I would just say,
Commissioner Young, I just want to let you know.
just to finish really quickly. I assume that the OPO report about the conduct of Mr. Schlotzman and DOJ must have had some concerns with regard to politicization of the Civil Rights Division. And I would just simply say that, yeah, I understand that Mr. Coates has been there for quite some time. There have been some allegations, whether they're true or not, that he was the subject of a memo by Mr. Schlotzman saying he's now part of our team. But those are the kinds of things, I understand, those are the kinds of things that we're concerned about.
Thank you, Commissioner Yaki.
Where do you live now?
San Francisco.
Commissioner Melendez.
No further questions.
Okay, Commissioner Harriet.
I have no question.
Commissioner Graziano.
Thank you, Congressman Wolf. I would like to think, and I feel confident, we would have been investigating this matter had it not been for your prior work. But your prior work has certainly been very helpful and drew a lot of attention to this issue. And I have two lines of questioning that I hope won't take very long. But there were some commissioners in their opening statements and one in their questions to you suggested that since this was a single incident, it wasn't worth our examination. You responded to Commissioner Kirsenallen saying that you certainly thought we would be derelict, and that I'll go back to your words that it might undermine the credibility of the Commission if we didn't. Let me just tell you one other reason for my concern. Would you agree with me that it sends a stronger signal, good or bad, depending on what the decision is, to dismiss a suit if you're on the verge of winning than not filing charges?
I would, because that would just send a message. I would. Sometimes when you respond, when a teacher, when a third grade teacher goes to the defense of the most defenseless in the class. As a young boy, I was a stutterer. I still stutter now. When a teacher would come to the defense of the person having the most difficult time, that sends a message to the whole class. We're not going to do that. And I think by doing precisely what you said, it sends a message anywhere. We're not going to allow voter intimidation anywhere, period.
Right, and of course, does it send a stronger signal to dismiss a claim that has received national attention and that most reasonable people who've seen this YouTube that was repeated on Fox News, that it would send a larger negative symbol than another case which perhaps should have been brought where the evidence is less clear?
I agree, because if the third grade teacher allows the young stutterer to be harassed and pushed around and beaten up, then that sends a message to the rest of the class, you can do it for everybody. So I think it absolutely does.
Yeah, and let me tell you one final reason that I tried to articulate in my opening statement why I think this is utterly necessary. By the way, we and you, I think too, but certainly we in the scope of our investigation requested evidence on every single investigation the Justice Department has done under 11B, because we want to compare that response. I might agree with Commissioner Yawkey and others that some of those prior responses are questionable, some of them are inadequate, but I very much want all of that information. And as you know, as I think your experience reflects, we've been stonewalled, delayed, and only last week we had, one of the new privileges that doesn't exist, and I used to work in the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel responding to congressional requests from the President's side. This is, to me, the most flagrant. They said that they would have to deny us the material last January, quote, "The Department is constrained by the need to protect against disclosures that otherwise would undermine its ability to carry out its mission," end quote. The statute that Congress has conferred upon us requires every federal agency to comply fully with our requests. And so last Friday, we finally got some dribbling out of documents, which I hope you also have. And among them, I'm going to ask this panel of witnesses to maybe identify what their statement was, because prior to last Friday, we got none of the witness statements. For 10 months, they deemed that either not relevant Or, so let me ask in their words, do you think that supplying you and other members of Congress and supplying the commission with the witnesses' statements prior to last Friday would, quote, undermine the ability of the department to carry out its mission?
No, I don't think it would.
Okay, so what we got last Friday, and this is our continuing problem, has redactions that seem to me ridiculous. I'm going to try to ask the witnesses who, and what, because the names of the witnesses are redacted. I have declaration of redacted. Now comes defendant redacted. Do you not think it's maybe relevant to our investigation to know which witness said which statement?
Sure, of course.
Please, I thank you for your effort to get the information for your own benefit and to help the commission get the information so that we can come to these conclusions that Vice Chairman Thernstrom says that we don't have sufficient information. I think we've got sufficient information to conclude that this case shouldn't have been dropped. We may or may not ever get sufficient information to conclude why, but I think it's incumbent upon the department to explain why it dropped the suit. I think we have sufficient evidence to know that it should not have been.
Thank you, Commissioner Graziano. Would you care to respond?
Oh, I would just tell the commission I'm going to stay with this issue until it's resolved.
Commissioner Taylor?
Congressman Wolf, my name is Ashley Taylor. I'm actually a resident of the Commonwealth, not in your district. I live in Richmond. But thank you for coming, and I want to thank you for the manner in which you've gone about this process, the respectful tone, my sense of you working hard to ensure that it's not drawn into a political fight, that you can discuss the issue in a way that actually advances the substantive issues, I think, that are important here. I want you to know personally, I have reserved judgment on this matter. I think it's important to try to keep an open mind and to do nothing more at this point than to try to draw out the facts and ask questions. I wanted you to comment in that regard on two things. One is the message that you mentioned before, that either the lack of aggressive prosecution sends or aggressive prosecution sends in a neighborhood. I'd like you to comment on that in the context of my view of the long-standing refusal to value incidents in the black community on the same plane that incidents in the white community are valued. Also like you to comment on the lack of transparency that I sense, which I think causes a lot of people concern and makes it more difficult to trust decisions made by governmental entities when they refuse to answer questions or hide behind privileges. So with that, I want to again thank you and just ask you to comment on those 2 points.
Well, I think the transparency and the trust issue is important because you saw the Pew Foundation study that came out last, I guess it was early this week or late last week. 78% of the people in the United States have lost confidence in their government. And I think accountability and transparency, I'm the author of this bill with Congressman Cooper, a Democrat, to set up a bipartisan commission to deal with the economic situation of where we are. And we, in our bill, we required that there be public hearings and transparency around the country to develop the confidence by the American people in whatever decision is done. Very tough things are going to have to be done to deal with it. So I think the transparency to build the confidence up, because the Pew Foundation, and I saw one of the reports saying that the Pew Foundation did that poll 4 times, because the first time they came back, they found the numbers were so startling that they didn't really believe it was possible, and they went back and they validated it three additional times. Lastly, I think the enforcement justice. I just think there's some things that just have to be done, no matter where they take you and whatever they do. And I think you have to restore the confidence. Obviously, somebody that was, if you go back and look at the Richmond Times-Dispatch editorial, they criticized me in 1981. I remember I was there, and some of my colleagues said, "What are you doing?" And they really took me to task. If you were an African American living in the South during that period of time,